The little gifts of life. When I first came to the US more than 7 years ago, I was a different person from the one some of you know today. On one hand, I was a regular data analyst consultant, a more social version of Dwight Schrute from The Office. I had my best friends, I had my work husband, my work wife, but I also had Priya, my best friend. You all know Priya, the one with the energy, the one who, when they walk into a room, just lights it up. Priya was short and bubbly, and she would always call me out on my BS. On the other hand, I was driven to make the most amount of money and influence at work, and did not pay much attention to how my actions affected those around me. I was arrogant and hot-headed. Sometimes I wouldn't even talk to people if I thought they were not good enough for me. I remember my favorite cafe in Cincinnati, Ohio. There was this beautiful musician playing jazz music. She had beautiful long hair, and the music would move me. It would always help take me off from the stresses of the work life, and I would be taken to a different place. It was amazing. But even though I so much loved what she was doing for all of us in that cafe, I could never thank her for it. My arrogance and my ego was holding me back. But that was not the only thing that was holding me back. You see, I was living in the Midwest, whereas most of my peers were in New York City, Chicago, the West Coast, living fancy lives, going to fancy nightclubs. They had beautiful times with beautiful people, and it just seemed, in comparison, that my life was kind of boring. I felt constantly comparing my experience in Cincinnati with theirs in the big cities, and I wanted to be just like them. I wanted to be, at wine tastings and along beautiful beaches, maybe. And so I decided to do just that. I took a flight to LA with Priya, of course. We rented out a Ford Mustang, an awesome, fast sports car. It was beautiful. Oh my gosh. We spent an extended weekend, a lot of wine tastings, beautiful drive-bys to the beaches. It was our last day. We had just finished up many of our wine tastings of the day, and we decided to go to this beach. It was about 40 minutes away. So we jumped into the car. We were not sober when we took that decision. I was sitting in the passenger seat. I remember looking out the window and thinking to myself that we were going pretty fast. I looked across at Priya and at the speedometer, and I remember the needle crossing 90 miles an hour. It's pretty fast. Before I could process what was happening, the car had swerved to the side of the street, up the banks, and come crashing down. I still hear the loud bang in my ears. This ringing, the burning smell, the pungent smell of plastic stinging my ears, my nose, and the pressure of the airbags pushing against my chest. I crawled out of the car, took stock of myself, and within a few minutes, the emergency services had come, the ambulance. They were able to take Priya out of the car. She looked okay. I was pretty sure that she would come back in a few weeks, at best, back to work. So as I left that day evening on the same flight back to work, I was really hopeful that I was going to see her in a few weeks. A few months later, Priya passed away. I was numb. You see, we had both taken this horrible decision to mix drinking and driving, but yet the outcomes are so different. I came out without a scratch. But Priya was not here anymore. It was not fair. It wasn't fair. Everything in life that I had thought, the principles, the values, the framework that keeps us sane, they broke down. And I was lost for answers. How could I honor Priya? How could I stop my mind from reliving what is happening, seeing Priya, seeing the car crash, go in cycles, and come out of it with a positive view on this? So I turned to centers of compassion, centers of answers to me in my mind, potentially. I became a regular member of the local church communities, the Bible study groups, and also a Buddhist monastery where I would meditate. And over the course of many months, this central question of how I could honor Priya and how I could make the best of this consumed my mind. And then one day, as I was coming back home from work, sitting in the bus, I had a powerful realization, a rubric, a thought experiment, something that helped me give answers, and one that I share with you right now. Imagine you are on the last day of your life, on your deathbed. What would be the most important thing in your mind at that time? What would you want? To me, it was clear that I wouldn't care much about the fancy nightclubs or fancy cars or having these shiny experiences that I thought was cool. They didn't matter. What I really cared about was knowing that potentially my life had been a positive experience to someone, and that the icing on the cake would be if they could be with me at that last moment of my life to say thanks and goodbye. But here's the thing though. What about 6 months out from that day? What about 6 years out from that day? What about all the way back to now? I realized the answer was the same. So that was when I realized that the best way in which I could honor Priya and make sense of what had happened was to cherish what I had, to pay homage to the gift that I had, the invisible gift that I had not yet considered. I have limbs, I have eyes, I can see, I can hear, I can talk, I can walk, I have a family, I have a car, I have a job. These are things that I had, but so many millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions don't have this. And yet I was not considering them a gift at all. I took them for granted. And so I started to make this transformation. I began by letting go of my ego. I began by practicing how I could treat every single one that I met with humility, with compassion, not letting my stereotypes come into play, not letting my sense of what's cool and what's not cool come into play. And over the last 7 years, everything that I have been blessed to gain, to develop into, has been a direct consequence of that. So here tonight, I request all of you, I challenge all of you to consider things in your life that you might not have considered. The little gifts, the invisible gifts of your life, and hold on to them and see, make sense of what makes the most sense for you in your life. A few months after I had gone through the transformation, I was back at that cafe, and there she was again. Her beautiful black hair, the jazz music. It again took me out of the world, out of this world, into a place of joy, away from stress. When she was done playing, this time I was able to walk up to her and say these words to her. Thank you for sharing your gifts.